good morning or good afternoon in Italy. This is Monica Larner, and we will be doing an Instagram live today with Stefano Frascolla of Tua Rita. And I will just have to find him so I can invite him to join us. Hold on. Don't see him yet. Well, we'll get him. Okay, hold on. Sorry. This is my first Instagram live, so I see a lot of people already following us. Where is Tua Rita? Oh my God, where are you? Well, hello everyone. Anyway, this should be a very exciting appointment. We're going to speak with Stefano for about 45 minutes, and we are going to cover his winemaking philosophy, his thoughts on his location in Tuscany, because he makes wine in a part of Tuscany that's actually quite void of context. There aren't many wineries around him. There are today, but when he started, it was pretty much empty around him. And then we're also going to talk a little bit about the concept of super Tuscans and how we see the super Tuscan concept evolving, because as journalists, we're all quite unhappy with the idea of super Tuscans as being a catch-all phrase for these beautiful wines from Tuscany. I can't find Stefano. Oh my God, Stefano, where are you? I see a lot of people out there. Who can I connect to? Oh my God, Stefano, where are you? No. Arriviamo. He just wrote me a message. Okay, he's coming. Anyway, so we'll get there soon enough. So as I was saying, our Instagram live will focus first on Tua Rita, the history of the estate, where it is located. Second, I want to kind of draw an arc that describes the winemaking style at Tua Rita, because in 2000, a wine called Redigaffi, which is 100% Merlot, got the first perfect score from Robert Parker directly himself in the print edition of the magazine. And that was a while ago, and I'd like to ask Stefano if he were to remake that wine today, if he would change anything about it. He's also, in the course of his own personal evolution at the winery, added on many different kinds of wines. He's playing with amphora. He's playing with longer skin maceration times. There he is, Stefano, I see you. Oh God, thank you. All right, let's see if we can get him on. Hello, waiting for Tua Rita to connect. And then, as I said, the third part of the conversation, we'll be looking at,
Hi, Monica.
Ciao, Stefano.
Hi, Monica.
Hi, I'm so happy to see you. I was getting worried. So how are you? How is everything going?
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you very much, Monica.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, listen, you missed my little introduction, but I just wanted to set things up to kind of give everybody an idea of where we were going to go with this Instagram Live. As I said, we're going to do it for about 45 minutes, and hopefully that'll give us enough time to really get to know you better and to get to know Tua Rita better.
Yes.
I am doing a series of articles. 2 will be published in about, basically in 3 minutes, with new reviews from Maceto, Ornellaia, and also Castello d'Ama. They also make a 100% Merlot called Aperita. Your article was published exactly a week ago. And what I'm doing is creating a kind of a pathway of fabulous wines from Tuscany, and I'm calling the series the Tuscan 10. And you were actually the first article in that series. And what the series eventually, my goal of the series is try to explore what are these super Tuscan wines. I don't like to use the word super Tuscan. In fact, in my almost 8 years.
I'm sorry.
Yes.
I didn't understand the question.
Oh, well, I'm not there yet. Hold on. The concept of the super Tuscan is always, to me, it's a catch-all phrase, and it doesn't mean very much. So the series that I've worked on talks about some of these wines. But first, I wanted to talk about Tua Rita. And I wanted you to kind of give us some context of how the history of the winery, why it is where it is today in Suvereto, why you chose this particular territory, your family, and if you could give us the beginnings of the Tua Rita story.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Tua Rita born from the passion of my family, especially from the passion of my father-in-law for the country, for the land. When we decided to acquire the small parcel of land in the Val di Cornia, we decided to begin to try to produce something new in terms of quality, in terms of varieties in this land. Only in 96, 95 we decided to change. We decided to change this our hobby in our main works. And we began to plant new vineyards. We began to make experiments, because when we acquired the property, we found here only an half hectare of Sangiovese and Trebbiano. We are speaking about 35 years ago, in 84, 85. And it was absolutely a case, was absolutely a lucky shot, because I repeat, we didn't belong to begin to make wine for the life. After 15 years, we decided.
But so the context at the time, because we're talking about the mid 1980s, that Italy was at the beginning of a renaissance for wine. There was, already we have great examples. Tignanello was already on the market, Sassicaia, a lot of the great wines that we already know were already well affirmed in their identities. So when you and your parents-in-law, because you work with your mother and father-in-law, your mother-in-law being Rita Tua,
Yes.
after which the name is the estate is named, you went from Sangiovese and Trebbiano and you selected a whole different palette of varietals. And I'm wondering why, what were your choices? What guided your choices back then?
But consider that between the 90 and 2000, it was in Italy a big movement about not only about wine, but about the food, about the wine, about the agroalimentare generally, and it was a tremendous period of emotions, very a big propulsione, a big
momentum.
Yes. In those periods, born the slow food, and was very exciting, and a lot of new producers, often coming from other kind of work, began to make wine, and we was in this party, and was very interesting, because was a different kind to make wine. Was a period when we start to experiment new varieties, and the big winery in Italy, and especially in Tuscany, was very stimulated by this new way, and also they became to make something different, and this create especially for the Tuscany and a big increasing of the quality. I'm sorry with all the people are listening to me, but for my English, but I try to I try.
Your English is perfect, Stefano. It's perfect.
Thank you. It's not true, but very kind. Monica, and Tua Rita was when we decided to plant international variety. Consider that the history of the coast in terms of vinification of high quality is very young, because if I don't make a mistake, this year was released on the market the 50 vintage of Sassicaia, and Sassicaia was really our locomotive, our
an inspiration.
Yes, yes, and the 50 years of history is a very short period, speaking about wine. And now we are, I believe that on the coast of Tuscany, we create, I'm speaking about of all the products, created a new style of wine. Because in this part of Tuscany, the traditional vintage of Tuscany, Sangiovese, the traditional varieties, is very difficult to cultivate. And for this reason, we, in the past, began to experiment something different. Personally, Tua Rita, I can say that planted in '88, first new vineyards that we planted. The Merlot, because the favorite wine of the Tua Rita family was the Merlot of La Parita, of Castello di Ama.
Right.
And we planted...
I have here your Redigaffi.
Yes.
This is not the final label. This
no,
is
no,
from
it's
a
not the final label.
vat sample.
It's not the final wine, because this wine was picked from the tanks, and we planted the Cabernet. But I can say that still now there is some possibility to experiment new varieties, experiment different varieties. For example, in the last few years, we are increased a lot the plantation of Syrah, because Syrah is a variety very influenced not only about. It's okay, the sound, Monica?
Yeah. I'm gonna show you. I'm gonna show our viewers two expressions of Syrah here.
Yes,
we'll get into the wines later on, but just because you mentioned it.
I can show the label of...
you have the final label, thank you.
The final label of... it's not the final label of this one, but it's 1 year before.
A finished label.
Yes. And this is my idea. The coast of Tuscany is a very new area to produce high quality wines, and is a style made with the traditional varieties of Bordeaux, but at the same time the international variety generally, but with a very personal style, with a very particular style, very conditioned by the soil and especially by the climate.
So can you give us a little bit of color to describe the area of Suvereto, your soils, you know, what the growing region is like? Because it's really, as I said, it's a beautifully empty part of Tuscany. It's not very trafficked. It's near the sea. It has a lot of, you know, steep temperature shifts. The soil is richer, redder, fragrant. As soon as you drive into the area, you're hit by all these colors with the blue water, the kind of green from the Macchia Mediterranea, this kind of reddish soil. It's really quite, I mean, the saturated colors are beautifully brilliant and strong. And if you could give us a little bit of an idea of where you grow your grapes and what the territory is like.
But speaking about the soil, Suvereto is very various. For example, Tua Rita is a small property. Is around 53 hectares planted by vineyards. But from a side to another, the soil change a lot. In the upper part, we are very influenced by the quarry or marbles that we have, and the soil is very rich of argilla. The soil is very rich of red clay.
Yeah.
Yes, of red clay and very rich of schisty. Schisty is a particular kind of stone, red, and is a very poor soil. But at the same time, at the same time, Suvereto is very influenced by the climate, because we are exactly at the end of the Piombino Channel. Piombino Channel is the channel between the coast and the Elba Island. This is very important for us, because we have every time, especially during the summer, a thermic wind blowing from the sea to the land during the first afternoon, and the opposite, from the land to the sea during the night. This is very important to have a difference of temperature between night and day, and this is very important to fight all the problem with the humidity, botrytis and other problems. Also, our maturation is very early. Normally, if you compare the Suvereto area with Bolgheri, normally we are 5 days, 6 days earlier than Bolgheri, like maturation.
And what is where are you farming exactly? You have the main group of the main vineyard near the winery itself, but
Sure.
You're also experimenting with different parcels that you're finding in areas nearby. And I'm wondering to see what are you finding in terms of soils and interesting hidden vineyards that you're looking at.
Well, we are trying to find a new parcel of the land to plant the international varieties, especially because especially in the very hot vintage like 17, 11, 9, we are looking for more fresh part for the vineyards, and also because it's very interesting to try to cultivate, for example, the Syrah, as I said before, in different kind of soil and different and more fresh area. But the more precious wine, the more precious vineyards are around the cellar, especially in the upper part. Yes.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And how old are the oldest Merlot vines?
The Merlot, the vineyards of Merlot are four parcel. The first is a small parcel planted in 88, and one planted in 96, 97, and 2001. All in the same part of vineyards, but with different age.
Now, could you walk us through a little bit of the timeline of your wines? What were the first wines you started making, and then what were the criteria in adding each new label or each new product to your portfolio? Why did you make the choices that you did? You have quite a few anniversaries now in terms of some of the wines too, so maybe we can discuss those.
Yes. But, sorry, Monica, you're speaking about the anniversary of the wine or my anniversary?
Oh no, of the wines, but
no, because this year we release on the market 25 vintage of the Redigaffi, the Giusto Rinoti wines, but it's also the 25th anniversary of my marriage. Because
oh, well, there you go. Perfect. A perfect celebration. Again, I don't have the final label, but here it is, the wine that just celebrated its 25th year in perfect parallel with a beautiful marriage. A celebration.
Enjoy. As I said at the beginning, we are still trying to make experiment in terms of vinification and in terms of land. For example, in 2004, we planted a vineyard of Syrah, and we start to produce a new wine made in amphora in the Orcio Toscano with these vineyards of Syrah. This is the Syrah Care. This is a wine made with 100% Syrah, vinified for 6 months with the skin in the amphora. And honestly, Monica, I was forced by my consultant enologist, Luca D'Attoma, and I was forced also by my enologist of the cellar, Marco Lamastra, to produce this wine.
You're forced.
Yes, because I don't believe too much in this kind of wine with a different style. I am very traditional, and I prefer to increase the production of our Syrah percent, the main Syrah that we produce. But they forced me to do this, and the experiment was very, very interesting. And we finally we obtained a wine that have a big respect of the characteristic of the Syrah. This kind of vinification is like an infusion. It's not a mechanic and not a very hard vinification, but and for this reason, the power of the wines don't cover the characteristic of the varieties. And,
well, I mean, yeah, there. I mean, if you look at your earlier wines, if we go back to Redigaffi, you know, and back to the time when you got 100 points from Parker, those wines are so exuberant and big, and there's a lot of, you know, new oak. Very, you know, they mirror a time. They're a time capsule of a moment in which those wines were so popular and made that way. And then you move over time, and you end up with a wine like this, fermented in clay orce in amphora. I mean, it's a huge jump. So your team was very convincing. They must have had very good arguments to force you into this huge other philosophy, and that's why I find it fascinating. And I'm just wondering, that question that I wanted to ask you, if you were to go back in time and remake the 2000 Redigaffi, is there anything you would change about the winemaking today, or would you take a different approach to that wine?
But it's very difficult to say, Monica, because it's impossible to make to have the same harvest in different year, for 3 reasons. The first is obviously often the climate, but the second reason is the age of the vineyards, and the third reason, very important, is the age of the winemaker. Often, yes, because for example, with Luca D'Attoma is my consultant winemaker. We often remember we met first time in 30 years ago, and 30 years ago, our personal palates, my personal palate test, the personal test of Luca was very different. And for this reason, also our philosophy to produce wine was different. And at the beginning, and also in 2000, we look for the power. We look for the extraction in the wine. Now we continue to look for this characteristic, but at the same time, we prefer to find the elegance, to find the balance, and we can obtain this also for the age of the vineyards, but we also obtain this with the experience and with the new, not new kind, but with the care of the particular of the vinification. And I can say that our work is a mix between the tradition and the innovation. We continue to make wines every year in the same way, but every year we kind to change something to find the particular to make something better.
Now you're continuing in that that spirit of experimentation and innovation, and I know that you're working on a white wine that will also see a long skin maceration time in clay amphora with the Ansonica grape. And I know that it's coming from a beautiful parcel that you found with very ancient vines. Can you tell us a little bit about that upcoming wine? It'll be a tiny production from what I understand, just a few thousand bottles, but I'm curious to know more about that.
The Ansonica is the traditional varieties of the coast of Tuscany and of the highland of Tuscany. And Ansonica is the same varieties in the same varieties called in Sicily Inzolia. It's absolutely the same grapes. And it's very interesting. It was very interesting because 4 years ago we rent. I'm sorry. We rent a very old vineyards owned by a gentleman of Tua Rita, 93 years old, that said me these 3 line of Ansonica are older than me. Because when I was a child, I remember the Ansonica from these vineyards. For this reason, we try to make, but the production is very small. It's between 1,000 and 1,500 bottles of this Ansonica, fermented for with the skin in clay. It's very interesting. It's a very elegant, a little bit orange wine. It's very interesting. I like a lot. I don't know if it's a good wine for the market, but I like a lot.
You said that you've already made it for 2 years, no? And you just, it was for kind of personal consumption. And now it'll be the first time that you'll put some on the market in the fall.
Yes. Now we are putting, not on the market, but we are putting with some customers, some friends, some bottles of the first vintage of the 2017. But we just make the final blend for the 2019, and we'll put on the market the 18 probably in September.
It's going to be exciting. Now, listen, I'm new to Instagram Live. I see a lot of people putting comments down at the bottom. So if anybody has any questions, now that I have my glasses on, I can see.
Yes.
If anybody has any questions for Stefano, please go ahead and ask them, and we'll get them to him as well. So what I wanted to also talk about, Stefano, is we talked about this. It's kind of interesting. Where do we go with the concept of the Super Tuscan wine? I mean, this is something that a lot of us journalists, we've been writing about for years. I wrote an article more than 10 years ago called Arrivederci Super Tuscan, because I thought it was time to say enough of this catch-all phrase that doesn't mean anything really. It's a from a marketing point of view, it's a valuable phrase, but it doesn't actually speak to a specific territory. The wines that are considered Super Tuscan can be almost any grape varietal. And the problem is that their price points are very different now. At the beginning, a Super Tuscan was the wine at the top of the quality pyramid, but that pyramid has become much wider now. So we have a whole base of wines that are considered Super Tuscans. And I personally don't even use the word in my reviews because it's just a marketing term. So it's something that I wanted to ask you, and I've been asking a lot of the Tuscan winemakers, especially in this series called the Tuscan 10, because these are wines that are benchmarks for the region. Can you think of a better way to describe these wines? Do you have an idea of what of what kind of terminology or grouping we can use to put these wines, this philosophy of wines together in one category?
But the expression Tuscan wine was created by the main opinion maker of wine, including Mr. Parker in around 90 years. But in the past, it means wine with a particular power, with a particular characteristic of a very intense. Now I can say that that we create a new kind of wine or style of wine. Our wines born not from the tradition of the traditional varieties of Tuscany, but they are created with international varieties, especially with a new style, with like a dolce stil novo wines, very sweet, very wines that are the son of the climate of a land like Tuscany, influenced by the sea, influenced by the warm, and I believe it's very important to to continue in this way, to try to make wines at the same time modern, but with a very personal side, especially very connected with the terroir. Because now worldwide they produce very good wine, but it's very important to produce wine sons of the land, sons of the terroir.
You had a suggestion that I found very interesting. There's a literary movement in Italian literature from the 13th century, called the Dolce Stile Nuovo, in which there are a lot of allegories to love and to softness, to sweetness, to warmth, and you were suggesting that that kind of concept could be applied to this school of winemaking.
But I repeat, now we finally found after 40 years, I'm speaking especially about the coastal part of Tuscany, but we finally found a style of the wine. If you start from the coast of Pisa and you go to the coast of the Maremma, you find wines normally very sweet, ready, with a big body, but also with a big elegance, and is a very modern style, but at the same time is a style very with a lot of terroir inside. I believe we must continue in this direction, because year by year we are refining the style. We are with the care of the particular in the vineyards, in the cellar, we are refining the style. We continue to increase the quality, and especially we continue to increase the drinkability of the wine. Also big wine with like the Redigaffe with the 15 of alcohol, a big extraction, a big body, but must to be elegant, must be drinkable. Two people at the table of the restaurant must finish a bottle. This is my idea. Elegance, drinkability, wines, approachable wines.
Okay, I see we got a whole bunch of questions, and so I'm going to ask, I hope I didn't miss anyone. The first question, Stefano, and this is actually very timely, a very good question, especially now that we have the COVID crisis underway. Do you face a possible labor shortage this year for harvest? And as you go through the different phases of vineyard work you have to do this summer, shoot pulling and all the rest before harvest, do you foresee a shortage of labor, of work?
probably I don't understand perfectly the question, but this year we
ci
make.
sarà gente che vi aiuta in vigna.
Sure, we have.
Sì.
Yes, we have, because
Ci sarà una
we have,
mancanza quest'anno?
probably maybe in the south, more in some part of Italy, there are less people working in the vineyards. But I'm speaking for Tua Rita. We have our team, our employed, very young but old employed, because they work with us from a long time. And also we have two team of people working for us since the 2014, 2015, and we continue to work with this team. Obviously, it's a very complicated situation, but I believe that the richness of every company, but especially speaking about the winery, the richness is the land, is the vineyards. The richness is the cellar, but the richness is also the people working with you. We are a very young and energico, is very I don't know.
Energetic, dynamic.
Dynamic, and very except me, a very young, energetic, and dynamic team. And I must say thank you to my employee, to the people working with me, because especially in this very difficult time, they help us. We are totally 30 people, but young people that work very hard with all the energy, with all the heart, and this is very important.
Okay, so the second question we got for you, Stefano, have you experimented with any co-fermentation with white grapes with your Syrah, Viognier, or maybe even something like Vermentino? Have you ever tried to co-ferment Syrah with a white grape?
No, never. You are speaking about if we had the white varieties to the Syrah.
Yes,
Sorry.
exactly. Yes.
Not at the moment, but I can say that this is funny, because when we in the family, when we stayed during a normal lunch or dinner, because during the lunch I don't drink wine, I had normally to the red wine a little bit of white wine, and my son, but with the normally I do this.
A little blend.
My son often. My son is just graduated like enologist during the lockdown, the 7th of April, and now he are working in the cellar, obviously. And sometimes he look at me and say, "Dad, what are you doing? You mix the white wine." And this is my idea. Sometimes I like a lot the big Syrah of the Côte d'Ivoire, and I like a lot the Syrah with a small addition of Viognier. I never try to do this, but this is my idea. I want to do. Obviously, we produce wine not only for business. Obviously, we must do our business, our work with wine, but also for passion. And I have some goals, are some wine that I like a lot. One is the Pinot Noir, and another one is the wine from the Côte d'Ivoire. And probably in the future I do this. And I also planted in the last 10 years small parcel of Viognier.
Aha! Aha!
Yes, because Syrah will be for the coast a very interesting varieties. very
I love
influenced by the
the
soil.
Sempre is one of my favorite wines, really. You do such a great job with it. And I'm a huge lover of Syrah. You know, it comes from, you know, my Californian roots, and I have to say you do a beautiful job with that wine. It's always wonderful.
Thank you very much.
We have another question from a reader, excuse me, a viewer, not a reader. Somebody has a 2009 Perlato del Bosco, and they want to know, it's a 2009. Should they continue aging it, or is it ready to drink now?
From the 2009, yes.
Yes.
Yes. From 2009 and now, there is a big difference. Because, as I said, the Sangiovese is probably the more difficult red varieties to cultivate here. Because Sangiovese is variety need more freshness. This is a very hot area, and is difficult to have a perfect phenolic maturation when the alcohol is overripe. For this reason, we found here the Sangiovese, and we start to produce the Perlato del Bosco in '92. Was with the Giusto Inotti, the first wine that we began to produce. But since the 2002, we start to add a little bit of Cabernet Sauvignon to this wine, because the phenolic maturation of Sangiovese, or the old Sangiovese, wasn't very good for us. At the same time, in 2002, we planted a new vineyards of Sangiovese with a particular clone of coming from Vigneti di Reuscedo, the R19, studied and selected to resist to the warm area like the mine. And since the 2011, we are producing a Sangiovese with the 100% Sangiovese again, the Perlato del Bosco with the 100% Sangiovese again. This happened in 2011. Since 2016, 2017, we are changing a little bit the kind of barrels, because in the past the Sangiovese was made 100% in barrique. Now we only use the big barrels of 20 hectoliter.
Okay, hold on. We have another question. So how would you compare the 2008 against the 2004 Giusto dei Nostri?
2004 or 14?
14, excuse me, 14.
14. Completely different vintage. In 2008 was, I consider, a not vintage for us. And the harvest was very anticipated, because began the 27, if I remember well, the 27th of August, and finish the 30th of September. 14 was a very humid, a very rainy season, and the harvest was 15 days later than normal. But personally, I like a lot the 14, because it's a wine with a very good possibility to age, with a good acidity, a very good body, but 8, sorry, is more is a wine.
We'll see.
Sorry, problem with the.
Okay, so I'm actually going to go back, Stefano, back to the 2009 Perlato di Bosco. Would you, I mean, I can answer this question. I would think that the drinking window, if we want to talk about when to drink that wine, would be now, and to not wait much longer. So that was for Julie Wu, 66. I would say don't age it much longer, but to drink it. The 2009 Perlato di Bosco.
But
what do you
probably
think?
The last vintage of Perlato del Bosco, you can age more time than 2009.
The more recent vintages.
Yes, because consider that 2009 was a vintage with a lot of warm, very hot. You can compare the 2009 with the 2003 and 2017. Very hot, and obviously the Sangiovese is not the perfect varieties for this kind of climate, especially on the coast.
Okay, Stefano, we have more questions, so bear with me. We have a question. Do you feel that with the rise of international grape varietals, that there is a risk to some of the indigenous or native grape varietals disappearing in your area or not being planted as frequently?
No, for two reasons. Because the first is that every winery continue to normally to produce the Sangiovese, because Sangiovese represent the tradition of Tuscany. Obviously, the Sangiovese of the coast is normally more ready, more round, more sweet than the big Sangiovese of the inside part of Tuscany, like Brunello or Chianti. But at the same time, I don't consider the Sangiovese like the tradition of this part of Tuscany, because Sangiovese is a varieties of the inside part of Tuscany. Consider that 15 years ago, 16 years ago, the main wine of this part of coast of Tuscany was the Rosé Scalabrone of Antinori. Really, we don't have a traditional grapes. The Sangiovese was imported from the center part of Tuscany to the coast.
Okay, Stefano, another question. Have you started to see the effects of climate change in your vineyard?
Not in the vineyards, because especially in the last, if I take a look to the last two vintage, like 18 and 19, I can say that are two very regular vintage with very balanced, with a very equilibrated and fresh summer. But I noted the intensity of the intensity of the rain, the intensity of the cool, the intensity of the cold. I believe that maybe the average temperature are changed, but especially it's changed the intensity of the phenomenon.
So you're seeing more dramatic weather, let's say.
Yes.
More,
yes.
Right, more pressure. So another question we have is, there have been a lot of problems with false bottles being sold, fake bottles. How are you handling any problems with fake Redigaffi being sold in the market?
No, we don't have big problem with this, because I can show. Redigaffi is every bottle has this kind of come si dice, anticontraffazione,
Anti-fraud or
anti-counterfeit.
Anti-counterfeit.
Yes, this is very important. Every bottle is personalized on the bottom, and with a particular kind of personalization of personal kind of bottle. And obviously, the fake bottles is a big problem, but the wineries are fighting this phenomenon, and often the fake bottles are made really in very rustic way. You can recognize it.
You can recognize it.
Any case, the people with the QR code can check the original, the origin of the Redigaffi with every hand phone with this QR code.
All right, we have another question that I'll answer first, and then I'll let you answer. Somebody asked, in the last 10 years or so, what are the best vintages of Redigaffi? And I will answer, because I love the 2013. And in fact, I know that you produced a special magnum to celebrate that beautiful wine. And the 2016 are two of my personal favorite recent vintages of Redigaffi. And how about you?
But in the last 10 years, 13 was a fantastic vintage. And But it's difficult to say, Monica, because I speak like producer, and the producer like the vintage more. That was very easy, and normally an easy vintage is a very good vintage, especially for the Merlot. I believe the 13 and 18 are two very similar vintage. Are two vintage of the elegance, are two vintage with the balance. 16 was a vintage with a big power, but probably in my personal opinion, a big satisfaction for me was the 2014, because it's very easy to produce great wine in very easy vintage like 18, 19 or 13 also, or 15, but in 14 was a very difficult weather, and when you obtain good result in a difficult vintage for a producer is a big satisfaction.
Stefano, forgive me, jumping back to the counterfeit bottles, since when have you been using the little, the ribbon? Since when did you implement that?
No, sorry, Monica, I don't understand.
To go back to the fraudulent bottles, since when have you been using the tape, the anti-counterfeit tape for the fake bottles?
Yes.
Da quando avete iniziato a usare quella fascetta?
Sorry, from this vintage, from 17.
From 17, okay.
Yes.
And then we have one more question. I hope everybody, yes. What is your thought about prices? Because we've seen a lot of very famous wines, Ornellaia, Maceto. The prices are rising quickly, and I'm just wondering, one of our viewers is asking, what is your opinion on these rising prices, and what do you do to maintain your price points, your price positioning?
But really, the price point of wine is not decided from the producer. It's decided from the market. Is the market deciding if wine, the position of wine on the list of restaurants worldwide, especially in the last few years, happened also in Italy, the same that happened in France, especially in some in some part of France, like Burgundy or some part of Bordeaux. But I repeat, it's not the producer deciding the price position of the wine. It's only the market. We follow the market for the position of the wine.
All right, here's a question that's actually kind of funny, because I'm now in Santa Barbara County, where the movie Sideways was filmed. And in fact, all of the vineyards featured in that movie are within 10 miles of where I'm sitting right now. The question is, after the movie Sideways, did you find that there was less interest in Merlot in the market?
No, I don't believe, because I have my personal idea. The international varieties are international because show different sides depending by the different climate or different land where they born. Obviously, the Sideways was a very particular movie showing a very particular idea about wine. But I believe the great wines are great it not depend. Our work is not depend by the fashion. Don't follow the trend. Also because it's very difficult to follow, Monica. Because if this year all the people decide that the Tannai is the new trendy varieties, I can plant the Tannat now because to follow the trend. Because if I planted Tannat this year, I have the first bunches after 5 years and the first wine after 8 years. And probably the trend is completely finished.
All right, Stefano, we're going to wrap up, but there's one more question, and I'm saving this one last because it's a good question. So if it was a beautiful Sunday night and you're at home with your family and your wife and your children, what is your favorite pairing of food and wine? What wine and what meal would you pair together?
Oh, I like a lot the stack, and if I speaking about my wines, I like a lot to hit a stack with the Giusto Inotti. It's perfect. But
so are we talking a bistecca alla Fiorentina, the thick cut of meat like that with the bone?
Sure. Sure. So, and my problem is that my mother-in-law, I am a very lucky man, Monica, because I work with my wife and my mother-in-law, and you can understand who is that manage the winery, and my mother-in-law is a great cook, especially for the Bistecca alla Fiorentina. It's really memorable.
You cut into the meat and you sprinkle over big chunks of sea salt that kind of melt into the meat.
Yes. Yes, and with the Giusto Inotti. Perfect.
With the Giusto Inotti.
Sure.
All right. Well, listen, we've gone over the time. I thought we would do 45 minutes, but we got so many questions. We are at an hour. And I want to thank everybody. I hope I didn't miss any questions. Here's one more actually to sign up. Somebody is asking, give us a latest update on the coronavirus situation in Italy right now.
Now the situation with the virus is a little bit better because unusual for the Italian people, but the Italian people follow the rule that the government get, and now the situation, like health, the situation is good. A small number of people in touch with the virus will be very difficult, especially for the restaurant. Will be very difficult for the tourist. It will be probably very difficult for the economic situation. This will be a problem probably in next few months. But at the same time, I can say that Italian people, at the opposite of other people in the world where normally the economic situation is not very strong every year, Italian people have the habit to the difficult situation, and I hope that all together we come back to produce, to sell and to promote our production.
I drink to that. Stefano, thank you so much for this wonderful. Thank you everybody for all the comments, and I see all these great comments coming up, and I thank everybody for watching. We hope to do more of these Instagram live sessions. Thank you for Stefano for being the first guinea pig in this experiment, and I really appreciate it. And yeah, wonderful. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you very much, and thank you all the people staying.
Yeah.
Ciao.
Ciao. Grazie.
Ciao.
And how do we turn it off?